All right, guys, we are in theory on the air. Thanks for everyone for coming. I'm just gonna quick check the chat and make sure everyone can hear okay, and we don't have any of the horrific sound problems we had going on last time. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm gonna try to not have like one big topic this time out, and we're gonna more or less try to just hit as many of your questions as we can during the time. Thanks everyone who sent questions ahead of time.
All right, guys, we are in theory on
Whoops.
the air.
Awesome. And now we have playback on my side. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, thanks very much, and we are going to try to hit as many as possible. Yes, thank you. It does sound better than last week. I've been having very strange problems with our video switcher here. Basically, it was working beautifully right until you hit the on-air button, at which point it goes for about 10 seconds and would require us to reset the entire switcher, and then it scrambled our settings. Anyway, it was a nightmare last time, but I'm very happy to be doing this today. All right, so okay, so here we go. I'm gonna take. Well, first of all, I want a quick announcement here. If you guys have not been downloading ComicBase in the last, I don't know, 40 seconds or so, there's a new build out there. It's build number 3597. The things that are different about it that you may care about. One of them is it has a lot of work to make it so that it handles monitor resolution changes. It's been kind of an ongoing theme for us in the last couple weeks, is just trying to handle the problem of what do you do when you go from a 150 144 DPI monitor to a 96 DPI monitor, or a 4K and 100% and whatever else. And worst of all is what happens when you drag a monitor from one end to the other. The old answer would be that your windows would go into very strange modes and bad things would happen. Hopefully the new answer is a little bit more pleasing to the eye. But if you do try it and you have any problems, please let us know. That's number one. Number two is, if you remember File Tools, under the File menu, there's a new Rebuild Pictures item under there, which allows it to go back and review all of your pictures. It does actually take a while, so this is, it says slow, and it means it. But what it'll do is it'll go through every single one of your items, see if it can find the picture for it, and build that up in the database, which means if you take the time to let your computer crank on that sometime when you don't need to use it for a while, then going from title to title actually becomes quite a bit faster, because then it already knows where the pictures are. It'll still go and look for any new pictures that come along as you go to a title, but it'll have pre-found most of them to start with. And then the last thing about it is we took away the confusing wanted item on the collection report. This has actually been a forum topic for a while, probably ever since we did ComicBase 2020. So the collection report it's almost the default report in ComicBase, and what it's there for is to give you a report of just everything in your collection. So it's one line per item. It's very pretty. In my case, it's very, very lengthy. It's thousands of pages because it's one line per item. But the other thing we had about it is it used to be a little bit more loosey-goosey about what was on it. This one report is specifically defined as stuff you own, and that's caused some confusion when people would use it to print a want list, because it also had a list only wanted items option in it. And so we get a lot of tech support on this one, which says, well, hey, I print a collection report, but it doesn't show I checked list only wanted, but it doesn't show me anything because it's the stuff you do have, not the stuff you don't have. If you do have that situation, really the best way to go is to use either the collection overview report, where you have the option to show the gaps in your collection by showing the missing issues, or use something like either a price list or a issue checklist if you're just trying to get a wanted list. But anyway, we took away the wanted checkbox in the collection report because it was just confusing everybody. So that's in the latest build from just a little bit ago. Just quick heads up that it's out there if you want to give it a go, and if you want to give us any early feedback. We do have one last thing we're going to slip in there before we make it like the 20.0.3 version. It's a surprise. I don't want to talk about it now, but it's pretty cool. Anyway, so that's what's going on with that. Greg C. writes, sometimes I look up a comic and it will open a title, and over 50 boxes will open saying the picture's not valid. Okay, let's go into the picture thing, because we just talked about it. All right, so let me switch over to number 2 here, and all right, and we are good. We actually have a monitor. And this time also, learning from mistakes, I'm using the live stream copy of Pete's Comics, not the production copy, because last time we were doing this one, I was using my own database, I, just as a demo, clicked off that I had Fantastic Four Golden Record #1, and then somebody wanted to buy it from me, and that was awkward. So anyway, this is a copy of my database, but not the real thing. So whenever you go to a title, if you watch over here, let me go to a longer one. You'll see, let me go back here. You see this, if you watch right here, where my mouse is, and let me see if I can zoom it in a little bit so you can see a little better. Okay. So if you watch right there, what it's going to do, I guess I can't have my cake and eat it too, but if you watch right there, what it's going to do whenever you go to a title, and I go to, especially on very long titles like Fantastic Four, is you'll see that spin. And what that's doing is it's actually going down every one of these issues here. It, first of all, very quickly fills in that it's got a picture, but then it goes and says things like, well, you know, has it gone up in value significantly? So in other words, does it need to color code it? Has it got any associated media files with it, which is what this column is over here. But you see it very quickly spin down that whole thing as it checks pictures. Well, what it's really doing there to get the picture here, in my case, I've got, let's have a look at my view settings here. I'm in the grid view. And what I've got here, my grid cover size is set to 48. Well, what we've done here is we've actually gone to my, wherever my pictures are stored on my computer, and every time, you know, it goes to a title, it says, see if I can come up with the thumbnail for that one. And it makes a 48 pixel, you know, wide size thumbnail, in my case, for every picture in the database. Which is why if I go to a title that I haven't ever gone to before, it takes just that little extra time, you know, to generate those thumbnails. And if you look very quickly, you can see it knows it has a picture, which it showed a little, you know, I have a picture icon, but it didn't show the picture itself. But whereas when I go back, it's much faster because it can just go blam and fill down very quickly because it's already computed the thumbnail. Anyway, if you've got a situation where you're going to a title and you're getting errors on the picture, unfortunately, it is going on, and it's going to want to say, for everything it finds that it's got an invalid picture for, it's going to want to say, okay, well, that didn't work out, let's go to the next one. And if that one's bad too, then you start having a problem. Now, a lot of bad pictures probably means you had a problem file copying the picture over to your disk to start with. Let me show you how you get to where your pictures are stored and what I would do about it if it were me. Like, let's say I had a problem with the Fantastic Films directory. What you can do here is if you click on right here on the picture itself, you can say Show Picture File. And what that's going to do is it's going to take me in Windows. I'm going to bring it over from my other monitor. Give me just a second. Oh, come on. Be nice. Awesome. My other monitor does not want to let me move that window. Okay, well, this is first weird glitch of the evening. Yeah, that's kind of fun. Let's try it one more time, and if that doesn't work, we'll move on. Okay, so really? Okay, that is bizarre. Anyway, so over on my other window, over on my other monitor, which you can't see, it had actually opened up the picture folder where that window lived. And what it's doing right, what you can do then is you can actually just go to that folder, delete everything in it, and then download them again if you have the archive edition. Literally come over here. Let's say that I'd already deleted everything that was in Fantastic Films. What you could then do is highlight everything, right-click, and say Download Covers, and it would pull down. And I'm pulling it from a special picture store that we use in-house, which warning us, don't do this, Bickford, because that's a bad idea. But for you, if you on your machine, what it would do is it would then download all the pictures again, and then they should work out just fine. If you have a lot of bad pictures on your machine, like I say, typically what that's a sign of is you had a problem copying them for some reason. And a lot of times that will show up as the files, the pictures themselves are 0 bytes in size if you look at them. It may be worth going out and doing a Windows search just in Windows Explorer and finding files that are 0 bytes in size and getting rid of them. Because especially if you're searching within your own pictures folder and you find 0 byte files, that's not a good picture. Just delete it and your life should get better. That would be my suggestion on that one. Alright, let's see what else we got. Oh, excellent. That whole monitor has decided I'm going to become unresponsive. All the tech stuff? Alright. Andre says, do I still have some scanners? Actually, I do. Let's look behind here. I have 2. If you guys are looking, this is the original well, it's not the very original Manhattan scanner, but this is the Manhattan contact scanner that we have left here. When I was clearing out the storeroom ahead of time, we found a couple of them. If you're in the U.S., send me $25 at sales@atomicavenue.com. Include your address. I will ship you a scanner, and along with the setup sheet to use it with ComicBase. We have 2 left. The first 2 people who do that get it. Send that to sales@atomicavenue.com. Is a PayPal account, and like I say, along with the with that, just include your shipping information. I'll ship it out to you, and that will take care of it. Okay. Next question I had here. Hopefully my other computer's playing along now. Okay, cool. All right, so let's see here. Tony said, how do I show a comic in 2 different grades? All right, pretty easy to do. Let's flip over to this other screen over here. And, okay, so let's say Fantastic 5. All right, let's say I've got issue number 2 here. And let's say I've got 1 copy in near mint, but I just picked up a second copy that's in very good condition. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that guy right there. I'm going to say duplicate. And then it's going to open up the edit window for Fantastic 5 number 2. Hopefully everyone can see that all right. If not, I can try to magnify it. Anyway, what that's going to do is it allows me to change anything I want about the second copy here. In this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say instead of it being in near mint, it's in fine condition. And if you guys notice, the selling price went down to 60 cents, the cover price went down to $1.99 and so forth. And then when I hit save, and just give me pull up monitor over, you'll see that the second one appears right next to the first one there, fine and near mint, just like that. Okay, that is how you duplicate an item. And you can, again, you can do that if you want to track multiple costs for different items. You can do that if you have anything that, that's different about your second one that you want to track, and they will all show up separately in reports and so forth. Okay, okay, Peter says that having a problem with ComicBase showing books listed for sale on Atomic Avenue is 0 quantity in your inventory. If you have problems on Atomic Avenue and you're wondering why they're not showing up, there's a couple of basic things to check. The usual one you want to do is, let me go ahead and pull up, where we got that web browser again. Good grief. Problem with having multiple windows open. Give me just a second here. And let's try going over to atomicavenue.com. Alright, so on Atomic Avenue, and let me go ahead and I'm going to sign in off screen because I don't want you all seeing my password. Okay. Alright, so here we are again. Alright, so when you go down to My Store on Atomic Avenue, down here, this is actually my store. When you click over here on Store Setup, this little gear there, and these are all the different things you can configure about your store, whether or not you show, special blurbs at the top for things you might have on sale, your different banners and logos. This is a lovely one that an artist, Mark Castaneda, for me, which I very much appreciate. And down here, it'll show you the databases that you're posting from. Usually, if your database is not agreeing with what you've got for sale on Atomic Avenue, it's because you've got more than one thing listed down here. In other words, you're posting from 2 different databases. What I would do, if it were me, is I would go ahead, click Remove, and remove all the databases, period, and then just repost them again. That gives you a clean start. Typically, when people have problems where we're posting from more than one thing, usually it comes from one of 2 mistakes is getting made. Either down here, and let me see if I can find Sidekick on this one. This is hard to do on this machine. Give me just a second, because I apparently have too many things in my dock area, so it's not showing me Sidekick. Let me see. I'm gonna clean this up just slightly. Give me just a second. Close that. Close that, and let's unpin a few more of these. And it still does not want to give me access to my toolbar on the second monitor. Darn it. Okay. Well, trust me that down by your main monitor, there's down by the clock on your main monitor, you're going to see a little, you'll see things like your volume. If you're on a laptop, you'll see your battery down there, and you'll probably see a little arrow pointing up. If you click that little arrow pointing up, it's going to take you to Sidekick. And let me go ahead and just fire that up so you can see it. Alright. Gammy right there. And let me move it on to the other monitor here. Alright, so here's Sidekick. When you're in Sidekick, make sure that when you click the gear in Sidekick, that you only have one database here listed, unless you really want to have two databases listed. This is better in ComicBase 2020 than it used to be. It used to be in ComicBase, any database you'd opened recently would automatically get added to Sidekick. We don't do that anymore because it caused too much confusion and problems for people, where they would open up an old backup, or they'd open up a spare copy of something and they'd kind of lose their place, and then they'd be trying to manage multiple databases at once. So now in Sidekick, you have to explicitly add the databases you want to use using the plus and the minus here. Now, I actually do have two databases in mind because I have a master database that we use, and then there's my database right there. But typically, what you would see is there should only be one database listed. That's the main thing that people typically would get wrong when they post from things. Another thing sometimes is people would open up an old copy of the same database and such, and as long as any database that shares the same ID number, and that's that really long weird hexadecimal number you saw earlier, anything like that is thought of as the same database by this guy right here. Atomic Avenue is going to see any database with your same ID number as being the same database, regardless of what it's called on your computer. By the way you see where that number is in your thing is go under your File menu, come up here to Collection Statistics, let it grind for a second, and then if you're me, move it onto your other monitor. And then click over here on the right where it says Database Info. And this tells you all the really geeky stuff about your database. Which again is going to open up on my other monitor. So, oh, there we go. Okay, and so this tells me, for instance, this is where it's located on my machine. This is how big it is on the disk. The currency that it's set to. Anyone who's, say, if you're in Canada or Australia or France or whatever else, you might see that it's set to either US dollars or the local currency. It's your choice. It tells you the last time the exchange rates were updated in your database. It uses that for converting between different currencies and your database's currency. And then here we are right there, your database ID. Now, if you have ComicBase 20.0.2 or later, there's a button over here that says Change that lets you change that to a different ID number. So that way you don't, if you do have two databases you're managing, or you'd made one database by copying an old database, you can, if you change the ID number on one of them, then Atomic Avenue will see those as separate databases on, when they post to the server, and that way they'll be truly considered separate. On the other hand, if you want to have multiple databases and have them seen as all being the same, then all you do is you file copy them in the Windows Explorer, and as long as they have the same ID number here, then they will appear to be the same. Just be careful, don't post from two things that seem to be the same but aren't. Alright, that is that. Any other questions that came in as a result of that? Let's see. Greg asks, what is the highest priced item that ever sold on Atomic Avenue? I don't actually know. I'm going to have to ask the Atomic Avenue guys that. It's a great question. I know we have sold things that cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Yeah, I don't really know. Typically, and I'm going to say this, even though we, even though we're associated with Atomic Avenue, and it's kind of in our financial interest to always say Atomic Avenue is your answer to everything, if I'm telling you just as a friend, if I had books that are worth just a ton of money, like more than a few $1,000s, Atomic Avenue probably, it might be a good place to sell them, or maybe if you've got stuff that's worth just a ton of money, I would actually probably go with like an auction site, like a Heritage or a Comic Connect or something like that. More or less because that market gets very, very narrow at the top of the pyramid, and you can make more money going through them, even if you're paying them an auction fee. If you, again, just have these jackpot comics. On the other hand, anything below $500, I would absolutely list on, Atomic Avenue or something similar. Okay, so let's see here. What is the weirdest or most unusual comic book that's been submitted to the database? Wow, it used to be, there used to be one called Muggy Doo Boy Cat, which was Maggie Thompson's favorite. I remember searching in the early days of the database for this one just because it was so strange. It was her gold standard for whether or not you had weird books in your price guide. Yeah, this is weird, but honestly, wow. I mean, as far as weird, I don't even know where to go with that one. We have everything from self-produced. There was a kindergarten class that decided for their art project they were going to submit. Everyone in the art class was going to make a comic book. They submitted to us. We indexed them. That's in there. Legit comic. If it had any kind of publishing, we'll put it out there. There are really, really strange. Man, there are strange things of every sort. I'm a big fan of like a little mini comic called The Amazing Cynical Man. Probably hits my personality pretty well. Matter of fact, I even looked up Matt Fiesel at one point and had him do an early ComicBase ad for us in Comics Buyer's Guide. But yeah, and I that's a hard one to answer. And let's see here. For the top sellers on Atomic Avenue, is it based on the number of copies sold over the week or the time period? It's based on price. Just wondering. It's copies sold, but it's. I don't recall the actual time frame it's from. It's a pretty narrow time frame because I know it cycles a lot, and that list gets updated every day at midnight. So it used to be we had a. It used to be when our servers were hosted off of Amazon servers. We had this weird issue where like the database server was on California time and the web server was on like Central time, and you couldn't change the time zone on the database server without like essentially stripping it down and reconfiguring it. And it was always one of those things that was never quite enough of a problem to fix, but it did mean it had this weird effect where like if you happened to be up at like exactly at midnight, I think California time, the list of top sellers would be blank for 2 hours because it hadn't triggered the thing in the database which told it was time to recompute them again. Anyway, since our servers have all been centralized now and everything's on Central Time, that problem doesn't go anymore. But that's how I know that the whole thing gets figured out slightly after midnight every day. Dear Veronica. Okay, so you said I have almost 20,000 books listed, 275 grand. Would not have to relist all the books again if I lose your current database. Will this work? To answer Peter Rotham's question, if you pull down your books on Atomic Avenue, it doesn't affect your database at all. You literally can just pull them all down. It takes a couple minutes for it to get it reflected. Your store on Atomic Avenue, goes blank for a few minutes. All you gotta do is post right over again, and within 10 minutes or so, everything will just pop right back up. It doesn't affect your local inventory at all. But if you're having problems with like you just have weird phantom entries of things that somehow are kicking around, I would just pull everything down and just post it right up again, because then at least you know what you're posting from. Betty or Veronica. Man, probably Veronica. All right. Okay, so Peter, I'll help or might want to reach out to us in more detail later on this thing if you keep on if there's still issues. But we'll certainly help as much as we can. I'll push on some of the questions that people had asked. Let's see here. Amy says, still using Windows 7. Will ComicBase 2020 work on it? Okay, so good time to talk about Windows stuff. So let me see. I'm going to try once again to get my web browser live. It just was super hosed there. Oh, wait, it came back. Excellent. Okay, so just apparently my machine just decided it was going to cause web browsers to go offline for a bit, because that's awesome. All right, so what I'm going to do, now I've got my actual web browser open again, is I had a page that I was saving from before. Let's see. There it is, PCWorld. Excellent. Okay. All right. I actually prepped something ahead of time, so hopefully this goes well. Okay. So. All right. So the story on Windows stuff. Windows. You know, the last version of Windows that was supported until recently by Microsoft was Windows 7. Really good version of Windows, all things considered. It's popular for a reason, because it was the first one to really kind of come together, you know, since maybe XP. Yeah, they had a bunch of bad releases in between them, but Windows 7 was pretty strong. It was very stable. And then after Windows 7, Microsoft decided to go into a very different direction, to be polite with it. They used a interface, they were calling it their design language Metro. But they decided to make everything on the Windows machine very tablet-like. And in that particular case, what they were doing was they had the dream of making it so you could have one device, whether it was your Xbox or your tablet or whatever else, that would automatically work on the same operating system and whatnot. The thing that all went wrong, on the other hand, is unless you had a touchscreen machine, you probably didn't want to be tapping ginormous icons everywhere on your thing in order to, you know, steer around it. You really liked your machine working the way it had been. And so Windows 8 roundly rejected. It was actually pretty solid underneath, but was roundly rejected by customers. Windows 8.1 came back. They sort of brought it about halfway back. They brought back the start menu, which they'd taken away. It was a weird version of the start menu, but they kind of half brought it back. It was a little better, but still people hated it. And then Windows 10 came out, and that's actually been a real return to form for Windows. With Windows 10, they decided to do what Mac OS did with X, in that they're just going to say it's going to be Windows 10 till there's no Windows anymore, is their plan. So it's always going to be Windows 10 build something or other. But the whole Windows 10 overall design is meant to be pretty much the same until they retire Windows as a platform. So whatever you do, it's going to be Windows 10 build something, you know, to get around. Now, Windows 10, they also it's kind of a perpetual upgrade cycle. Every couple of months, they push a new version of it down the line. It updates in the background, usually in the middle of the night on your machine, so you never really know that it did much by default. But it's definitely one of those things where they really want you to have Windows 10. They're going to make all the Windows 10 upgrades free once you've got them, but they really want you to be up to date with what they're going. Now, on the back end of that, so I think Microsoft has this deal where it's like 7 or 8 years after they've released an OS, they stop supporting it. It goes into, it's called extended release, or extended support, and then eventually it gets end-of-lifed. End-of-life is very, very bad, because as you guys all know, there are just an enormous number of people who are trying to hack Windows systems. Trying to hack every system, really, but Windows in particular, just because its massive, massive customer base is just under perpetual attack. Every tiny little flaw that can ever be found is being hammered away night and day, and they're constantly having to release security patches just because someone finds a way to overload some kind of memory in some weird app that ties to some other app, and that, you know, lets them read some, you know, something out of your machine that they shouldn't be able to get into. So this kind of preventive maintenance, you know, for bug fixes and exploits and things like that, absolutely crucial. If you're gonna, if there's anything you love that you want to hold on to on Windows, you better have it, the current version of Windows. Anyway, this is all a long way of saying Windows 7 got end-of-lifed a couple of years ago, and then it got really, really, really end-of-lifed earlier this year. If you still have Windows 7, all right. The short version is, will ComicBase run on it? Yes, it'll run on it. Because there's nothing that Windows 7 doesn't do that we need to have it do. That being said, I wouldn't put any data I cared about on a Windows 7 machine at this point, because there's no patches for it anymore, which means there are known exploits the bad guys have out there. They can just take over your machine. And so with everything tied into the internet these days, as soon as that situation exists, you're putting your life in your hands if you still continue to use the old system. Now, one piece of good news that did come up today, and this is why I wanted to save that web page. There are actually some ways. For a long time, Microsoft was making so you could get Windows, 7 Windows for free if you had older versions, including Windows 7. Now, I understand you can still get Windows 7 if you you know, I think you have to like go to some site and say, oh no, I have a weird disability and there's some reason I couldn't read the other 8,000 notices you gave me saying it was end of life. I do believe if you Google up free Windows 7 upgrade, there might be a way to get there. But I got a note today from PCWorld that there's a way to get a legit copy of Windows 7 Pro, which is the better version of Windows 10. I'm sorry, Windows 10 Pro. You can get that for like $40. And I'll put the link on this one in the show notes here. But basically, if you go, this is a legit copy. This isn't like an eBay gray market copy. This is, again, this is the good one. And Windows 7 Pro has some great stuff in it. It has BitLocker encryption and some heavier network support and a lot of good stuff. For $40, to me, if you're still using Windows 7, this is a no-brainer. And frankly, if you got the Windows Home version, this is probably a good idea if you have any of these heavier networking needs. But I'll go ahead and put this in the show notes. But I would definitely, if you are using anything other than Windows 10 at this point, I would say get the heck off. This is Windows 7, Windows Vista, Windows 8. 7 and Vista are officially end of life. 8 and 8.1 are going to be end of life soon. But realistically, Windows 10 is the way to be right now. I would definitely go there. All right, let me get back to, because I've managed to hide all my other chats on myself, so I can't see stuff. Okay, so that's still going. All right, other questions that had come up. Jeff asked, how do I show CBCS comics? Let's show that. All right, getting back to ComicBase. Alright, so let's go ahead and refresh our screen here. Alright, so you guys might have noticed that the conditions, all the near ones, they're all showing as near mint when you start. But when I click down here, I can see different grades here. My own world, I occasionally, I think I have one restored CGC thing in my entire collection. I have a couple of CGC books, not many, and so I keep a pretty slim list in mine. Your mileage may vary, and where that's going to come up is if you go here under Setup and you go to Grading, and then you go to here in Grading, you might have noticed this thing here. It says Grading Sets. Now, a couple things about the grading setup. So the grading setup, we hit this earlier on where we talked about how everything is like a certain percentage of near mint and whatnot. You can go ahead and define any grade you want, but what I would do first, before I got going on this, is I would click the grading sets over here, and I would go ahead and look. So what grading sets is for is it's meant to give you access to say, look in or out, do you use the following types of grades? And these include, CGC standard, restored grades, CBCS, which is where your question was, standard grades, restored grades, or PGX and so forth, and those apply to both comics and magazines. So if I wanted to add CBCS to mine, what I would do is I would just check off CBCS, and you might have seen over here that that all shifted around. But as soon as I get out of here, this suddenly grew CBCS grades in the list over here. And then if I go over here and I scroll down, I might need to exit the program and come back in. I apologize for that. Or go to a different type of collectible and come back in so it redraws this. Let me go to books and then go back to comics, and let's see if it reloaded that. No, it looks like I have to exit and come back in. But anyway, what it will do then is it will add in the CBCS grades to your list of grades that appear right there, as well as in my case I chose the restored CBCS. And that's a good way to keep those lists from getting just completely overwhelming. So yeah, just go up under here, go to Setup, show it to you one last time, go to Grading, Grading Sets, check off any that you use, uncheck any you don't use, and then it will keep those lists somewhat reasonable. Alright, what else we got going on? Alright, so Jet City Comics asks, is there a way to get a sales report, weekly, monthly, or yearly from the database? Jet, if you could put in the comments, are you referring to like a sales report from like the point of sale system that's built in ComicBase, or are you referring to Atomic Avenue? I don't know which one you're going from. I'm going to say it's not a built-in function, but depending on what you're looking for, there might be some kind of hacky way I can think of that gets you someplace like that. All right, Andre asks, do you think we'll in the future make a version for Linux? Wow, that's a great question. So, if you guys are following Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference news this week, things have gotten interesting again. I don't know if you guys know this, but I used to work for Apple back in the day for about 9 years, and they're so ComicBase way a long time ago was on Macintosh in a program called HyperCard. In order to be financially viable as a program, eventually we had to expand out to rewrite it from scratch to work on the PC, which we used Visual Basic and their Visual Studio set and rewrote the database in SQL. Access? It was the Jet database engine was what we used on the PC. So we rewrote it for that. That went through many revisions. Unfortunately, at a certain point, Mac OS X came along, and shortly after Mac OS X came along, Steve Jobs and company decided we're going to retire the part of Mac OS X that allowed it to run Mac OS 9 things, and so the only thing that you could run on was native Mac OS X software. And unfortunately, they had also earlier killed off the software we were written in HyperCard and that whole development stack, and so they kind of gave us a choice. Well, did you want to rewrite ComicBase again from scratch in another language and another database to have it work again on the Mac? And at that point, we just did not have the resources. And as ComicBase got bigger and there got to be more code involved with doing anything we did, you guys probably know that we spent 4 years rewriting ComicBase another time to run on another database with another language, with another development system to become ComicBase 2020. Doing that again in another language and another database to work on the Mac has always been one of those things like, oh man, I'd love to make this happen, but I don't know how we get the time and the effort to make it happen, because it's such a big effort and such an alien environment. I mean, it really is a completely different language set, completely different database, and so forth. But we did have a kind of a long-term plan in place, and the long-term plan started with, well, okay, if we modernize the database as part of the ComicBase 2020 effort and we move it over to SQLite, well, SQLite, as it turns out, is a common platform that's actually also a native platform on Macintosh. For Mac OS X. So it's like, hey, wait a minute, so we could move the data now pretty expeditiously. Well, that's a good start. And then the other half of it was there's a program, not a program, but an environment called Mono, or it got rolled into Xamarin, if you guys have ever heard that term. But basically, Microsoft several years ago embraced open source in a pretty big way, where they took all their top secret stuff, the guts of almost everything that is Windows, and they put it out there in the open source world. It's called .NET, but they made .NET open source, which means that everyone else can look at the source code and build it for different types of platforms, and so it makes things more portable. Well, what happened eventually is .NET got ported over to where the Mac can run it. And we thought, wait a minute, so if we've got a database that runs on the Mac, if we've got an environment that's now written all in .NET, that now runs on the Mac, hey, I'll bet you we could actually get the code to run under .NET without rewriting it into Objective-C or some other completely different language again that would make it unsupportable. That was definitely our plan. And now Apple's kind of thrown us a left hook lately with their announcements from Worldwide Developer Conference earlier this week, where they announced that they're going to be taking all their future Macs are not going to be built on Intels anymore. So under the covers, if you guys, I don't know if you're Mac parsons or Windows parsons or whatever, but for the last couple decades, if you actually got down to the silicon, other than Apple just having really great styling and a lot of fit and finish and a really nice operating system on top of it, the guts of the machine were basically it's all running on an Intel PC, right? And so it wasn't really that surprising that there were things like Boot Camp, which is an environment where you can actually just tell your Mac, hey, I want to boot, and I can choose whether I want to run Windows on you right now or I'll run the native Mac stuff on you right now, because under the guts it was all stuff running on Intel Silicon. Apple's decided, you might know from like over the last several years, since they started really doing the iPhones, they've been very invested in doing their own silicon designs, their own chip designs based on the ARM processor. I don't know if you're supposed to say ARM or ARM, but these are processors that are very good at low power stuff. They're very good for mobile work. Not quite as powerful as as Intel's flagship stuff, but certainly for the kind of mobile stuff that Apple's come to dominate, they were a good choice. Well, Apple's decided that they're going to start releasing Mac OS on ARM processors, and they're going to stop doing Intel, which makes things very complicated, because it means, among other things, that they've announced that Boot Camp will no longer work. So Boot Camp is, Apple always has to have a fancy schmancy name for things that are kind of normal. Like, you can't just call it a wireless router. You have to call it an airport. Well, you can't just call it a partitioning software, which is all it really is. It takes your hard drive and splits it into two sections, and you say whether you want to boot off one section or the other section. You don't just say it's partitioning software, no, because that's not the Apple way. No, you say it's Boot Camp, because it allows you to boot one way or the other way. That stuff's been built into the Apple basically since about when Mac OS X came along, but they announced that it's not going to work on the new hardware, which means that you won't be able to run Windows in any kind of native way on the new stuff. Now, they simultaneously were showing the folks over at Parallels Desktop, which is one of the other virtualization solutions that Mac people can use. They did show a demo of it running on the new silicon that was largely working, and so there's definitely the thinking that there will be some way of running some kind of virtualized things, but it will undoubtedly be slower. It might be glitchier. There might be some real limits on what it does, but it also, in the quick little bit of looking we've done, it really complicates any kind of plan we'd have of taking code, one set of code that runs on both, the PC and running it any kind of natively at all on the Mac. And so it seems like what Apple's asking is, if we want to get back on the Mac using that idea, that it's once more becomes a rewrite hundreds of thousands of lines from scratch, and whew, that's a hard road. So it's a brand new announcement. Things are still going to shake out from it, so we don't really know where that's going, but that is, like I say, it's a bit of a left hook for us. All right, so let's see here. From Atomic Avenue. So Atomic Avenue, that would have to be a feature they build in on their side. Certainly I'll pass it on to them. I definitely think the reporting on Atomic Avenue could use a look, because there, effectively is none. All right, hopefully I don't get in too much trouble for saying that. Okay, so what else did we have here? All right, Stan had trouble listing his comics for sale. Okay, so real briefly, let's talk about how you list your books for sale on Atomic Avenue in general. A lot of Atomic Avenue questions today. All right, so let's say I've got some stuff I want to sell. The basic gist of how you sell things on Atomic Avenue. So Atomic Avenue is an online site. We're partnered with, which basically it's modeled on the Amazon used books selling experience, where the idea is you're not selling at auction, you're selling at a particular price, all the things you want to sell, and it just basically sits up there until it sells, at which point I think their site takes something like 15%. You get a note saying it's time to ship it. 2 weeks after you say I've shipped it, you get money transferred into you. That's the basic model of how that works. If you want to sell your own books on Atomic Avenue, the interface, you basically do it by loading up ComicBase. It's one of the reasons there's a ComicBase free edition. All right, so let's say, I'm not going to post an Amazing Fantasy. Let's say Amazing Fantasy 2nd Series. So here's a couple we actually do have. So step one is mark that I have something in my inventory. So, I just said I have one copy of Amazing Fantasy, number 2nd Series number 1. Which is worth about a millionth of what Amazing Fantasy 1st Series number 1 would be. But anyway, and then if you look way over here on the right, you'll see there's a sale checkbox. If you don't see that checkbox, by the way, you can another bonus tip here is you can come up under here, click on Columns to View, and you can say which fields, out of all the millions of fields you could be showing, that for any particular thing, you say which ones do I want to see. And so what you're looking for is you're looking for an item called for sale. Make sure it's checked, and then it will appear in your list if you don't have it. But anyway, all I have to do really is just make sure that that's checked. For sale is checked. One other thing I might want to check if I've ever set it. The default on this one is 0. So typically, unless I set this way, it wouldn't be an issue. Is if I come up under here and I say, where is it? Reserve quantity. It's on the other tab. If reserve quantity was set to something other than 0 for some reason, I think we hit this in our very first show. This used to be called min quantity, but you also have an option in ComicBase of saying this is the number I want to hold back from sale. So, and the use case for this one is either if you're supplying your own store and you always want to make sure you have 5 copies on hand for customers, or if you just have comics where like, look, I don't mind selling you my duplicates, but I don't want to sell you the last copy I have of something. If you go through and mark your reserve quantity as 1, then it's only going to sell things that you have in excess of that. So make sure your reserve quantity is not higher than the quantity you have in stock. That's the only check. But anyway, basically all you gotta do, mark that you have it. So set your quantity, mark that you've got it as for sale, and then you're gonna come up under here, and whatever you've set in that way, you say post items for sale onto Atomic Avenue right here. And it does a quick little check, and it says, all right, in my case, there's 60,462 items I have listed as for sale, which if I sold them all, which would be a really cool day for me, which, by the way, I would collect a cool 294 grand. I can say things like offer free shipping on amounts over X amount. I can say whether I want to allow international shipping at all. If I uncheck this, it means that the only people who can buy from me are people in my same country. So if I'm in England, people from England can buy from me. If I'm in America, people in America can buy from me. You have the option of offering free international shipping on offers over a certain amount. You notice this is pretty high. The answer is because international shipping is really expensive. You advise whether or not you want to automatically collect sales tax, and if so, from whom. I'm in a pretty high little tax locality in terms of sales tax. Good news is in Tennessee, no property tax. Or no, well, we have property tax, no state income tax. So that's good. But and then you also have an option over here. This is kind of cool. If you're feeling daring, is you can say, look, if my stuff doesn't move right away, you can have it automatically knock itself down in price by a certain amount, either a certain fixed amount, every time, or a certain percentage of the original price, and you can do it every so often until it hits a certain bottom threshold, at which point it'll stop knocking it down. But if you are thinking, let's see what we can do to hustle things along, that is one way you can go. You can decide whether you want to list your very fine and your near mint items as very fine dash near mint, which is kind of like, this is like old school mail order. If you guys ever bought anything from like Joe Rogovsky or the Comic Warrior or anything like that, what this is saying is, look, I want to tell my customers my stuff looks pretty good, but I don't want to get into endless arguments with people who are just being, grading Nazis about tiny spine, dings or something like that on a $2 comic book. It's not worth it to me. And so you have the option here, if you want to, of just automatically having those ones listed as very fine through near mint, which buys you a little bit of wiggle room when you're getting your stuff up there. You can say whether or not you want to mark the items when they're selling, in which case they'll be checked off. You can find marked comic books. This is that column at the far right there. That's very popular. If I've just doing quickie searches, I can find marked things. And normalizing conditions. What that is Atomic Avenue doesn't get into the half condition stuff. And so if you're thinking about like VF plus or VF minus, Atomic Avenue doesn't do that one for the same reason that a lot of people don't want to say very fine, say very fine to near mint. They don't want to be arbitrating insane amounts of grading disputes from people and say, well, this is a VF, but it's not a VF plus. It's there's a grading guide, and when you get into the half grades, almost no one reliably hits them all the time, and so it was considered in Atomic Avenue apparently made the decision that they're not going to get into that game. So if you do list a bunch of VFs and VF pluses, this will automatically take them and move them to the next regular condition. So if I have a VF plus, it gets moved to VF, for instance, or a VF minus. If I don't know if there's a VF/NM or a VF, F/VF and so forth. There's a long list of kind of like the half grades, and it moves them to the one that's the next lowest grade. That's a whole grade, I believe, is the way that works. Anyway, that's all the minutia of this one. But basically, what you're going to do at the end there, and I'm not going to do that, is you say post your inventory. It then compresses this sales file down, post up to Atomic Avenue. In about half an hour, you will see in your Atomic Avenue store that suddenly you've got your inventory. And it doesn't matter whether it's 5 items or 50,000 items. They all go up there all at once. By the way, if you want to make a change, like let's say I had this one listed as $2.99, and I decide, no, that's too low, I want to make it $5. All I gotta do, change it in ComicBase, repost your stuff, and when it reposts, it automatically updates your Atomic Avenue inventory to match. By the way, another thing it does is if I've sold things from this database at the same time, it will also tell me, hey, you just sold the following 17 things. Do you want to deduct them before you post again? And the answer to that question is always yes, because posting things that you've already sold is a bad idea. But anyway, so, and then the general terms on Atomic Avenue are things go up there until they sell, or you take them down. Let me go ahead and view, if I say include the value graph, then one kind of neat thing here. Let me just show that again, because a lot of people don't know how to do that. This is a list of this particular comic book that I'm clicking on Atomic Avenue. And you can see, first of all, you can say things like, this is its price over the last, over time, where it's been selling for. And then it also does a stock check on Atomic Avenue. It says, well, who's got them for sale? And if I go and say show available copies, what it's going to do then is it's going to automatically go straight to that issue on Atomic Avenue and say who's got them in what grade for how much. And then, so Atomic Avenue, if I'm buying on the system, and this is a good way if you're also looking to fill holes, just come up under here, find a comic book you're looking for, say view available copies, and it says, hey, I'm looking for Amazing Fantasy 2nd Series number 3. Let's see, Capco Comics has got one in mint for 3. He's got one in near mint for $2.50. There's, this is a pretty easy comic book. Very fine to near mint. Let's say, $1.99 from Cyberspace Steve sounds like a good idea. I hit add to cart. When I'm all done, I check out. And then whoever you bought things from get, say, you've sold, made a sale message. They ship the things off to you. They get paid a little later, and ideally everyone's happy. So that's the basic kind of deal about selling on Atomic Avenue. Let's see where else we got here. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Andre asks you, so no Linux. Sorry, I got sidetracked because that was a really long digression. Linux maybe. There's another thing I prepped here. Let me look for it. It was market share. Let me see if I can find it. Give me just a second. I had it open right before I went on the air because I wanted to show it, but my oh, here we are. May market share. Let me come up on. It's launching Photoshop. That's going to take a moment. Let me open this up in something easier. Let's open this up with photos. Okay, so move that over to the other screen, of course, and we got that. So this is the market share of the different platforms at this given moment in time. Windows is for, and this is laptops and desktops. This is not things like phones. So Windows is sitting there at 86.69%. Obviously, anyone wants to play in this space, you probably want to, do something on Windows. Mac's been sitting there just under 10% for a while. Linux, on the other hand, has had, it used to have virtually nothing. It used to have like 1%. It's in recent years gone up pretty significantly. It's up to 3%. And you say, well, 3% isn't a lot. On the other hand, I could look at that and say that's a third of the size of the Mac market. So, when you start looking at the development effort involved to get on a given platform, that figures into it. For what it's worth, .NET still runs under Linux, and Boot Camp and all those kind of booting things, they still happen. The guts of the stuff we're built in still has ports to Linux, and there's various other technologies which I'm blanking at the moment, which promise to make it reasonably, yeah, like it's not the stupidest thing in the world you could think of to invest the time to make stuff work under Linux. So that's a maybe for me. I'll admit my own experience. I don't have a deep Linux background myself, so I need to be told a bunch of stuff about it. But the path is clearer than the path. Well, it used to be the same ideas because Mac OS is also built under a version of Linux. This path used to be pretty clear of how to get from where we're going to Mac. It basically is the same path we would have taken to get to both. Now the macOS path is diverging, so I don't know what the story is on that. Oh, by the way, if anyone cares, these are also the numbers as far as installed base of Windows. You see about 60% of the people who have Windows are using, or I guess the 60% of people, period, in the world are using Windows 10. About 25% are using Windows 7. Those Windows 7 guys, I'm telling you guys, get off. Get to Windows 10 if you want to stay on Windows. That would be my deep advice to you. You see how Windows 8 was never really adopted. 3%. That's pathetic. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. I thought I would share. Okay. Let's cut back to the main camera and let's see how we're doing. We're almost an hour in. I'm probably going to want to wrap this up pretty quickly. And me too, Greg. I guess I'm not buying a new Mac. So running CB from parallels Windows will go away at some point. Should I consider using a Windows native laptop for CB4 at some point? I don't. Honestly, guys, I got to think on this some. This is a brand new announcement to me, and I haven't really processed it fully. So I wanna, I want to think on where this kind of leaves the world. I'm not. Yeah, I'm just not sure. It's a lot of new information for me, and it's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of different ways of getting from one place to another. There's there might be a web play that that comes into place. There might be some kind of lighter or thick client thing that comes into play. Maybe there's some kind of like combination of all of the above. I don't really know. One of the things. So one of the things I'm a little concerned about from the Apple perspective is. It almost feels to me like they're embracing the same thing that Windows got wrong with Windows 8. Where Windows 8 said, look, we're tired of building separate apps for our Windows phones and for our Windows tablets and our Windows touchscreen desktops and our Windows, regular desktops and our Windows laptops. We want to build one app and it runs everywhere and it kind of has the same interface. That was their whole Metro thing. And that was a debacle. It did not work. They tried I've never seen Microsoft so unified on a direction trying to push it down people's throats, and people just choked it up. They just did not want it. So I'm going to say that was not great. Apple feels to me like part of it feels like they want to take back their own destiny because you don't like having any part of your technology stack if you're Apple based on somebody else's stuff. Apple likes owning the whole thing. So I think I think they're frustrated with Intel slowing up of their releases because Intel is like plumbing the edges of the physical universe in terms of how small they can shrink chips, and I mean you're talking about nanometers for the traces right now, but Intel is having some real problems getting their next chips out again and again and having them always be faster, significantly faster than the last generation. So I know it's been a frustration for Apple, and so Apple I do think wants to go a different way, but I think that a big thing that was behind it all is they wanted to have it so there was one interface to rule them all. They're making a big deal at Worldwide Developer Conference about the idea that I can suddenly run iOS apps natively on my MacBook, and I don't know if I want to. I mean, there's some things like scheduling software where, yeah, sure, maybe that's a good idea. I use a program called ShotLister for making for like if I'm filming like a video short or a movie for arranging the shots I want to do, and that's kind of a nice visual kind of app that works pretty well in both environments. But something like a spreadsheet or like ComicBase or things like that, productivity type things where I just type a lot or I'm looking at a ton of data, those things tend to fit pretty unhappily in this very visual limited space world that you're used to with App Store apps, like your iPad and your iPhone apps, and so that was something that Windows experienced pretty hard, and it didn't go great for them, and so I'm not sure if that's going to be a win for Apple if that's what they're thinking. Like I say, guys, I got to process this one more to have a more intelligent idea of what the right way to go is on this one. But anyway, so I'm gonna maybe take one more here, and then I'm gonna pack it up. Let's see. I'm sorry. I got distracted. I forgot to actually answer the question, which was, should you buy a new Mac or should you buy a new PC? One of the possible futures that I'm considering that they may be thinking is that we just have separate devices for all the different things in our life. I mean, that could be like the real way they're thinking about stuff. I mean, I got phone stuff I do on my phone that I don't try to do on my laptop. I got laptop stuff I don't try to do on my desktop. I got tablet stuff I don't try to do on either of them. I just have a lot of different devices in my life. And they may be thinking that's the natural way to go. And so maybe just expecting, like, you want to do like spreadsheet type things? Buy whatever machine you want. Maybe it'll be from us, maybe it'll be from someone else. We don't care. That might be part of their thinking. I don't know. If it were me, and I was running Parallels on a Mac right now, Parallels, it sounds like they're trying to make some mojo happen to make it work. I would wait till it shakes out and we see where this goes, because it sounds like they're going to be a couple years making the transfer, and by then we'll have a much clearer picture of where to go. So, keep your eye on it, but you don't need to jump right now. So just hang in there until you see how the wind's blowing. But if it does turn out that get a Windows laptop to run Windowsy type things, not the end of the world. I mean, you can get very capable laptops for $600 now. So, I mean, is in not joke laptops. So maybe that's just a thing. Okay, last one. Isn't the rumor that Diamond is still running off of an ancient Windows operating system? Yes, that is my understanding as well. Last time I saw the computers at the Diamond office, wow! If it was Windows, it was really, really early. So it's funny. It sounds terrible, but it's a lot of production stuff works that way. If I run a sign printing business, or I run any kind of a warehouse inventory, or a lot of retail, if you see like the guys who look up your inventory at a store, the more modern guys these days are you see them at Home Depot are actually pulling up the website on their phone, and they have like a special page that gives them like inside stuff on it. That's how ComicBase Central over here works. Is we run off of a special version of our own website. But a lot of other people have their own dedicated stock systems and dedicated inventory type things, and those things tend to be a million years old. Really, really ancient type stuff, keyboards with function keys, the whole 9 yards. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. All right, well, anyway, guys, thank you so much for attending. We're going to do this again next week. If you would, again, I encourage everyone to, as they say, like and subscribe. So, if you subscribe to the channel or if you click like, it does help spread the word. And also, for the Q&A next time, just make sure you post the questions in the chat, and hopefully we will have increasingly less technical problems as we go. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time. And now I got to figure out how to turn this off. Oh my goodness, which window was that?